name is Tito. I work at Tearfund, obviously. I lead the delivery team as a team of project managers, an agile lead, and supplier process manager. So it's a cross-functional team. And I've been working at Tearfund for a year and 6 months. Before that, I'd never worked in charity sector before. I'd worked in tech and non-profit organizations. So this was a change for me, and it's been a learning journey. But yeah, that's basically in summary.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And can you kind of start letting us know how would you describe the context of the what was happening internally at Tearfund when we first started working together?
Um, so just for context, so when I joined, I saw that I'd been booked for a meeting with you, Julia. And I thought, oh, why do I need a meeting with Julia, this person? And I think it's because Beth knew I was going to need the support. Beth is my line manager and she's the head of comms. And I think she knew I was going to need support because I was joining the organization at a very tricky time. They had gone through some restructures probably a few weeks before I had come. My team was relatively new. I think we used to be a different we had a different name and then we were changed to the delivery team. So everything was kind of new. People were going through a lot emotionally. Obviously, with change comes a lot of emotional challenges and um stress. So I was coming into a situation where a lot of change had happened. People were feeling a bit insecure about their roles. They were trying to adjust to their new roles, also adjusting to maybe losing colleagues. So a lot was happening just before I joined, and I didn't have that context. So I came in all wide-eyed, excited to be in Tearfund. I love Tearfund. I love the vision we have. I had all this energy, and I found that I wasn't getting the same response. So that's kind of what I came into.
Brilliant. And what were you seeing on the ground? What did that look like in practice?
I think what was tricky was that because people were going through this and I didn't have that context, it made it a bit of a challenge to understand some of the energy I was getting back. So where I'm all wide-eyed and excited and positive about let's do this, we can do that, and all the things I think we can do, I wasn't getting the same level of excitement as I thought they would have. I also found that it was just a bit tricky navigating some relationships because obviously people had a bit of suspicion. I was here to fix an issue that they had tried to fix many times and they hadn't had much success. And so there was a level of suspicion with the way people treated me sometimes, but also it was just it was understandable, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we know that change, even really positive change that you're looking forward to, is still has the element of stress to it. It's still
Yeah.
difficult. It's still different. There's some adjustment to happen. So when that change also has elements that have more of a negative impact, like you said, people leaving, teams changing, kind of introducing new ways of working that you didn't feel like you had a huge say in, those are all things that create a real sense of stress in the system, in individuals. So how do you feel like you responded to that? And kind of how did you manage that and get to closer to where you are now?
I think initially when I joined, I'd heard about, when people throw around the word, oh, restructure, there's been change. I didn't fully understand how much impact it had made on them. And then I had signed up, and maybe because of the energy I was getting, there was a course that was being done at TFN at the time. It was building resilience as managers. So I thought I need this resilience because what I'm getting, I need more. I need to build some resilience. So I signed up for that course. And in that conversation, they talked a lot about the impact of restructure and the impact of stress on people and how the balance, trying to find a balance between stress and productivity, and how sometimes when you're so stressed you can't even be productive. And in that conversation, I had to look at myself and understand how ignorant I had been to a degree. And so that took me back to I then went back to have conversations with people, literally asking them directly, tell me more about this restructure. Tell me how it's impacted you. Tell me what you've been experiencing. Where are you? Because I know, words like burnout will come up. How are you feeling? Are you feeling okay? how's your well-being? I started to pay more attention to those things that maybe in my initial first couple of weeks I just thought, oh, let's just get the work on, let's just get the work done, and to be more sensitive to what their challenges were. So that was very helpful, and that kind of helped me approach things differently, with grace, with kindness, with a bit more gentleness, as opposed to excitement and buzz.
Yeah, I think definitely that came across from the first time we met, is the empathy that you bring to the kind of question. You were kind of, yeah, a bit caught off guard with how kind of coming with all this energy and people just not responding to it. But you didn't go, oh, what's wrong with them? You went, oh, what's causing that? How do I figure this out with them? And I think that was so important, and really speaking to them, that kind of conversational style of solving the problem, rather than kind of going in and trying to figure out the solution. You went in and talked to people and understood where they were coming from. And I think also the complexity is that these are all individual human beings who all have a slightly different version of that experience. They have different aspects of it. I think something you said as well that I thought was really powerful was you talked about kind of, I'll hold the weight of that now. Like, let me hold the weight of this change, of the emotional aspect of it. And you focus on, what are your strengths? What needs to change? How might we change it? Kind of, let's focus on the actionable, kind of productive stuff. And let me kind of help you to hold some of the weight of that emotional stuff. And I think that made a really big shift, kind of acknowledging that, but
Yeah.
supporting people to kind of move through it and be constructive. I also think we've both talked about the teams that you were working with never gave up. They were feeling that stress, but they were always engaging. They were always kind of being productive and wanting to figure stuff out and move forward.
Yeah.
So how would you describe the way things have changed then, since what we're talking about here?
I think we were having a conversation the other day with a team, and someone said, we couldn't even think of some of the things we want to do now because of how, I don't want to use the word messy, but that's the only word I can think of how messy things were before. Like the fact that now we're more solution driven. We're not just thinking about surviving. Now we're thinking about solutions and thriving outside of, oh, let's try to make a system that wasn't working work. And I thought that that statement really stuck with me. The fact that they said we can actually think about things we couldn't even think about before, or working with someone who's enjoying the job again, and they're saying, oh, now I can enjoy what I'm doing again because we've solved some of the problems that they felt they had to keep dealing with. It's been a significant shift, and it can look subtle, but when you have those conversations, that's when you realize just the impact that that gradual journey has had. So things are much more improved in the way we deliver work, in the way we deliver appeals, in the way we deliver projects, and in the way we raise funds, basically.
And like you said, I was working with the teams before you started in your role, and I just want to say, I don't think it is very subtle. I think the change is very significant and substantial. I'm sure the teams would all agree with that as well. The kind of, from every perspective, like you said, solutions finding, but also the kind of culture and the feeling. And I think what you're also describing is that safe space to figure things out, and not feeling defensive, not feeling like it's a kind of competition. How do you feel like you've created more of that safe space for people to kind of share feedback and be a bit more constructive?
I think from the beginning, it was very clear to me that if we were going to do anything, we needed to carry people along. So, whereby before that, I think there was a concern about getting feedback. You always had this negative connotation to it. If we're going to make, and people don't, I always heard people don't like change. They're not going to like it. They're going to push back. It's going to, so I was prepared for that to a degree. So knowing that and knowing the expectations, I knew it was very important to get the people that we wanted to, I don't want to say help, but the people who were supporting to be on board with whatever we're trying to do. uh, we needed to make sure they felt heard. We needed to make sure they could give us quick responses if things weren't going the way they wanted. So having that open door policy was very, very important. And I think I also had to understand when people would say, oh, the people don't like change, it's never going to work, or they don't like, oh, feedback is so bad. I had to understand that they were also talking from their perspective, and I didn't have that history. So I could come in as this objective person and get conversations and build trust and build connection. And so I spent a lot of my first few weeks just meeting with people one on one, trying to understand where they were coming from, hearing what they had to say, and taking that on board, especially when I felt like it was very valuable. And then I remembered coming to one of the tilt stories. Actually, I don't know what the tilt. It was one of the tilt sessions, and we're talking about feedback. I think that was what it was. Was it feedback? Or it was about it's safer not to do something than not to. There was
Yeah.
emphasis on that. Like, what's the risk of not doing anything? And I went back with that kind of statement and that kind of mindset to the team and said, it's better we do something, or the risk of not doing anything is actually higher. It will cost us more in future. So having those relationships and building relationship and hearing people, and always being ready to take feedback, we which people thought was criticism, was awesome, because I didn't mind. Tell me it's not working. Tell me what you don't like. I don't take it personally. It's a job. I'm working for you to make things better for you. So if it's not working for you, just tell me. And that was really, it was really helpful to have that mindset.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect example of like really modeling what you want to see. So not saying to people, you should just get better at receiving feedback, because they have all sorts of reasons for why they feel defensive, why it feels like a criticism. But you were able to receive feedback and very transparently be like, great, I'm going to respond to that. Here's how I respond to it. So that made it a bit safer for people to kind of see that if you were giving them feedback, it was so that you could kind of do something together about that,
Yeah.
that it wasn't a personal attack. It was something about like, here's a problem, let's solve it together. And I think that collective approach to the problem solving and to decision making was really key. I
Yeah.
also just want to pick out what you said about getting the feedback quickly. I think that's a very like agile concept of the feedback
Yeah.
loop. So rather than sort of, maybe even monthly kind of check-ins, one-to-ones with people and being like, here's all the feedback, instead doing it all the time in much
Yeah.
smaller light touch ways. It feels less intensive, feels less kind of focused and sort of scary. So I think you were able to have that kind of continuous dialogue with people, which meant that they had time to open up to it as well and see it happening in progress.
Yeah.
So several of the staff at Tearfund have also taken part in our Agile in Action and Facilitation Skills for Changemakers courses. What do you think their participation in those has kind of added to this work? How did that help?
Um, I think it's having that shared language around what agile looks like. Because one of the problems was everyone just had this agile, let's just scrum, for example. Or like in taking part in like the courses, I think there was a shared language. And when we say agile, what do we mean? And how do we apply that to the different things we're doing? And also the facilitation, especially, I think it's helped meetings to run better, or help retros to run better. People know how to move a meeting along and get get to the goal of it, get actions from that, get clarity from it. And it's been really great. I think especially for my team, we're trusted to actually facilitate those meetings. The delivery team where would be called on, can you help us run this retro? Can you help us do this? Because of what they had learned and how they'd apply that, you could trust us to facilitate a good meeting. So I think generally the shared language and then the practicalities of actually using all the things that we learned has been so impactful. And I think it's really played a key role in the progress we made in the fundraising group as a whole.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think one thing we've always wanted to do with those courses is kind of give people the tools to talk about these things in ways that work for them. And I think, especially with facilitation, if you've learned a bit about facilitation, it makes you a better participant as well. So that meant that there was so much facilitation that you were doing, so much conversation, so many conversations being had and discussions and kind of problem solving workshops and things. It was such a key part of doing this well, and it was helpful to lay those foundations. Um, and in terms of you as a leader, what would you say kind of all of this work and the support with us has kind of, how has that equipped you to in your leadership?
I'm laughing because so much has happened. I think it's the journey. It's been a very humbling journey. I think the first thing is also being humble as a leader, accepting that I didn't know everything and trusting my team to carry the responsibilities with me. So even when we're trying to talk, there was this work stream we had to deliver, and I realized I couldn't do it all by myself. So having the team take on different parts of it was so key. But I remember our meetings every time, Julia, was always different. There were times when, oh, things are going so well. And there were times when I literally, honestly, I probably cried. I might have cried, or I might have looked like I was going to cry. Maybe I held it back. But it was quite challenging when you feel like you're getting pushed back from people when you're just trying to get everyone to move forward. And I think for me, I've learned to give a lot of grace to people to understand the reasoning for why they were responding the way they were. Also respecting the people I did work with. I think I earned a lot of respect for my team, for the people I worked with, for everyone, because despite the challenges they faced, they always showed up, and they showed up with a lot of grace as well. I can imagine how annoying I would have been coming with like all this, oh, let's do this. I can imagine how annoying that would have been knowing what they were going through. And to be humble enough to see how gracious they were towards me. I think that's the thing that I really appreciate, the kindness of people, the way they showed up, the way they responded, even when they didn't feel like it. Seeing people was very important. But also having that safe space to come to you, Julia, and go, oh, this person is making it really tough today. And then you give me context because you had the context of some of the things they had been through that I didn't have. And you give context, and I'll always take that back to it helped me understand better. It helped me to hear what they were saying. So I think as a leader, I the one thing I don't want to say one, but a key thing for me is the humility. It's been very, very important. Like you don't know everything, you can't do everything, you can't fix everything. You need to trust others, you need to rely on people, you need to let them lead you sometimes because they might have the expertise or the technical abilities that I didn't have, and to be able to trust them. That a lot has I've grown a lot. I thought I knew everything until I came here, and then I realized I had a lot to learn.
I think I would add to that something you've always prioritized is seeking connection with those people. So even there were some really frustrating times where, just cross communication, like what are we not, we're missing something between us here. But you were always like, that's the problem. I want to figure out what we're missing, how we're not quite connecting. It was never, how do I solve the problem of this person just not getting it, not being on the same page as me. It was always what's that bit in the middle that we're both missing. And I think that's really powerful. I think that does come back to that humility, but I think it's also that kind of, yeah, treating people like human beings, but also respecting all human beings and the kindness of it, I think has allowed you to move through situations with staff members and even members of your team that other people might have got really stuck on. But I think you always saw that as a, like, how do I fix this connection issue here? And how about with other leaders? So leaders within Tearfund, outside of those teams, and kind of had been making a lot of these decisions about the change that had happened. So there's obviously that naturally creates some tension when change is implemented and the people who kind of are on the receiving end of it. What was your experience with that as a leader?
Those are some of my key stakeholders, right? Like if I'm doing this thing, these are my key stakeholders. So I need to definitely get them on board. And also, it's weird to say this, but try to earn their respect as well. Because they'd been here for longer, they knew more than I did, and I was coming with new suggestions or new solutions that I needed them to see. So I know some of the things that we had introduced were things that had been told before we did them that, oh, that person is never going to go for that. They're not going to say yes. And these are key senior stakeholders. And trying to get those people to see it from the other side, that was challenging. I had to use a lot of my authority. I had to show up with a lot more strength in those situations. One of the things we talk about is our ways of communication and color profile. I'm a strong yellow, which is I want everything to be fun, and I'm also a strong green because I care about people. But in these situations, I had to be very red, which is where you have to be more assertive, you have to be more decisive, you have to be clear about what you want to do, you have no time to waste. So with people that I thought, oh, this might be a challenge, I had to assert a bit more of my red energy, but also in a way that wasn't, it was more because I knew that's what they preferred. So applying what was needed for each leader as required. And that was really helpful. So when we eventually said we're going to fix some things and this is how we're going to do it, because we'd had a few conversations prior to that, they could trust the decisions we're making and they could trust me to a degree. And that really helped. But I knew that it wasn't an easy battle. It was a bit of a push and pull situation until we found a compromise. So yeah, I was
Yeah.
yes.
I think it's often the case at leadership level. You've got obviously people who are very experienced, often have quite strong opinions on things. So being able to go in and kind of speak with confidence is really key, because if you go in and you're unsure, then they're going to go, well, yeah, maybe I do know better than you. So like, let me kind of change what you're saying. So I
Yeah.
think, yeah, being really confident in your perspective, knowing why you're saying it and where that's come from is really important. And I know you would always go in with the kind of evidence, the logic you'd followed. So you don't just have to go in and say, here's my position, and then try and hold your line with it. You kind of hold the line to evidence and logic and the kind of thought process. And so that shows where it's coming from and why it's the right kind of idea. I think you did that really, really well. It's interesting you say about kind of stepping into that kind of more red energy. Was there anything that helped you to do that in particular?
I think um it's how do I put this in a way that is safe to say? I just remember conversations, right? In our coaching conversations, where you would give me context on different individuals and say, this is what they need. And knowing what was needed was so important because then I understood that, okay, with this, I need to have evidence, I need to be very logical. It's not emotional for them. It's very, you have to be able to defend your decision. So I think having those conversations where I'm telling you what I think I want to do, and you're coaching me through it and asking me the challenging questions. When you asked me those questions, I knew what to expect when someone else would ask. So I always went in prepared because I had already had those conversations with you. So it was almost like a trial run because you would give me a hard time. You would challenge my some of the things I would say, and that challenge is very helpful. So yeah, I think that was very, very, very important for me and also to understand who I was or the personality I was working with.
Yeah, so I think two things. I think you're right about the idea of kind of practicing. And my experience was that I would ask you some like challenging questions to try and understand more about it, and you would always have the answer. So I think a lot of the time you would think, oh, I don't really know. I kind of think we should do this. And then I kind of question you about it. And then you would leave going, I do know that we're definitely going to do that. That's a great
Yes.
idea. Got it absolutely correct. So I think
Yeah.
that was also part of it. But I think practice is obviously really important. I think a lot of people struggle with that confidence and authority kind of
Yeah.
expressing that. So practicing is a good idea, and getting people to ask you difficult questions if that
Yeah.
helps. The other
Yeah.
thing I think you're talking about is being really audience led. I think we understand the concept of being user audience led externally, but we don't always think about the impact of it internally. And I think it's so clear that it's important at leadership level when you're trying to get people to kind of commit to things, make decisions along with what you're saying. Identify who your audience is, what are the kind of profiles we're talking about here, and how are you going to hit all those notes and make sure that they have what they need so that they agree with you. We're not trying to trick them into agreeing with you, but we want to make sure they have what they need so that they understand that what you're saying is the right thing. So I think
Yeah.
again that was something you built up that picture of what your audience portfolio kind of profile was. um, Brilliant. That's all really, really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing. I just wanted to have a bit of an open question. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we kind of open to questions?
No, I think the thing is, like, when there's so many things when it comes to, because obviously we're talking about change and being agile in it. I think it's very important that you're not too tied to anything. Like, you have to always be somewhat flexible, when you're going through change, because things come up that you don't know, and you have to have this flexible mindset towards things. I think is very important. I also think it's important that you you don't let um people's opinions of things also be yours until you've kind of done your research by yourself. So when I came in, I knew people had different opinions about different things, and they would tell me this is how you should go, this is how, and so many different voices. But I had to then do my research and find out what was the best direction. So I think having that clarity of purpose, clarity of mind is so important, but also not being too tied to anything where you're so rigid you can't change. Change is literally a constant part of life, and I think the fear around change kind of stops us from actually making the progress we need to make. So that's something I really wanted to emphasize. I think I also just really want to talk about respecting the people you work with and respecting what they have to say and hearing them and seeing people. I think before anything, before what we do, before what actions we need to take, I think seeing an individual, seeing a person and respecting them for just who they are is so key. Because you can get more from those relationships when you can build trust and build connection than if you just were dismissive or you didn't respect an individual for who they are. So I just some of my random musings.
100%. I just want to reiterate, like, that's definitely what I saw with you from day one, is just how invested you were in getting people to come with you on the journey. That it wasn't about kind of coming in and I've got the solutions to the problem and I'm going to kind of tell you what to do. That bringing people along with you and respecting their kind of experiences and their expertise and their knowledge was such a key part of how you wanted to approach this. And I think it is a really important kind of takeaway for dealing with change in organizations generally. I absolutely agree. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. And now we'll go to some questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for such a thought-provoking and beautiful conversation. I know loads of people will have got a lot out of it. So we're going to open the floor for questions. You can post them in the chat and we'll gather them up. You can also pop your hand up if you would like to ask your question on mic. Our question and answer session is also being recorded, so all of that good stuff is going to be shared afterwards. Just as people are thinking, something that really struck me, I kept writing down some really big, important words around connection and grace and kindness and gentleness and respect and humility. And I think what really came across for me was not only about the importance of embodying those values, but also you creating space where those values were nurtured. So you were receiving them and other people were living them with each other. And I think what you said about strength is part of that as well, of bringing that into the picture. And so I guess my question is just about that, seeing that behavior in other people and perhaps what that meant to you, or what it meant to kind of notice that, or say that that was happening, especially perhaps to other people in the organization who were, you know, concerned about the changes.
Well, to be honest, I think Tearfund is a Christian organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we are naturally inclined in a certain direction. So seeing that, so I remember when I joined, and I because I didn't know how intense things had been, someone said to me, "Oh, one of our prayers for you was that it would be that you would struggle too much." So they had been praying for me before I joined, even though I was coming to lead. I think even though maybe they they kind of had their struggles, and that for me had such an impact. That's people that I don't even know yet are praying for me not to have too much of a difficult time. And when you have that response, and that's how you come in when others are struggling, you just keep remembering that it's not who they are, it's a function of what's going on. And you begin to give back what you are not, they might not be the ones giving it to you in terms of being kind to you, but others are. So you're able to then have that and flow from that to someone else. And I think that was very humbling, when I was making a lot of mistakes. I was just talking. I didn't know everything. And they were always gracious and answered my questions and were patient with me. So yeah, it was easier to then pass that on.
Thank you so much. We've got some questions coming in, so let me share them. We've had a couple of questions about your reference to colours, of like ways of communication in relation to colours. So we've got one person asking, was there a particular test that you used because of that kind of resonance with needing to switch on like the red energy? And then linked to that is this something that Tearfund did for your team, because not everybody has it in teams where it's been useful?
Yeah, so we did there's a test called See Me profile. So you find like your See Me personality is a See Me profile, and it kind of groups. You're not one color, but basically the idea is it kind of tells you your preferred communication style. Not necessarily who you are, but you know. So if you're green, you like people, you like to work with people. So the thought is let's do things together. If you're yellow, it's let's make sure this is fun and colorful. And if you're red, it's more let's stay on the facts, and blue is more about the details. So just a general. Oh, Julia shared in the link. So we did that. And it was something that we did in our team. My line manager, Beth, who is amazing. She's actually, she's, what do you call it? She can do this professionally. I can't remember the word. And it was really helpful for us because then it helped us understand how we worked with each other. And I really highly recommend that because when you're not then in a meeting with someone who might be more red inclined, you don't take it personally. You just realize that's their preferred communication style, and it helped us have that shared language. So it was really, really helpful, and I highly recommend that as a team. That's something that you can do to improve your understanding of each other and also improve how you work together really well. I don't know if is that all that answer that question, or is there more? Is that it?
I
Did I answer?
I think so, but do jump in the chat if you have follow-up questions around that.
I would just add, I think
Yeah.
that obviously if you're able to get kind of a paid tool, something like that, that's really helpful. But I think the key thing is what we've kind of talked about a lot, which is the empathy of understanding if I'm immediately coming into a conversation with someone and I'm immediately having a negative reaction to it or feeling like a negative reaction from that person, probably we've got a different communication style. It's very unlikely that they're coming into that conversation wanting to not connect and not have a kind of, a meaningful dialogue. It's probably that we're miscommunicating, kind of communicating differently. So there's other ways to think about that. There's things that you can do just to kind of, it's the kind of principle of it, I guess, that's the most important. But this is a really nice way of kind of specifying and breaking it down. So it's the core is the principle.
Yeah, exactly. I think because some of the tests we did was after anyway, and it was real small. Oh, I need to understand you. Why do you have this point of view? Why do you see things this way? What's that about? Oh, what can I learn from you? Okay, what can you learn from me? Yeah. So it's seeing people and just grace.
I think I would also like to add, as somebody with ADHD, I think it's really important from a neurodivergence perspective that often neurodivergent people will communicate slightly differently. And so that can cause issues where kind of people don't fully understand that. It's another great example of let's not treat that as, oh, they're being difficult or they're being aggressive, or they're being too confused, they don't understand what I'm talking about ever. It's actually probably that we're communicating in different ways and that's causing that problem. So like, let's figure it out together. Let's collectively solve that problem rather than seeing it as a problem with the other person or with yourself, which we can often do as well. Like, why can't I explain this more clearly? Let's figure out what's causing that lack of connection in the middle.
Thanks so much. We have another question in the chat. Did you learn any key lessons around engaging senior leaders and getting support for your approach?
To be honest, I think the one thing I learned is it's not everything they're going to say yes to. And they have bigger reasons that, so for me, I lead a team. But then if you're responsible for the overall fundraising budget or target, the things that seep into your decisions might be completely different from what I need to achieve what I want. And so learning that they had broader things to think about or bigger reasons for why they would say no was very helpful. Been in those conversations, and even down to, oh, I think we need more people. Oh, we can't afford more people because we have to invest in something else. Having that understanding, it helped me to just really respect how challenging it was for a senior leader to make the right decisions, because I'm bringing my information, someone else is bringing this. They have a lot of people to decide between, and respecting that, and trying to I think maybe that's also my personality. I try to understand before anything. I try not to take anything personally. I try to understand the reasons why. So I think one of the things I learned was just the fact that there's reasons why they would say no, and there are also reasons why they would say yes. And many times, if I wanted to get a yes, I knew what the questions would be. It's going in there with preparation, going there with answers, going in there with confidence in what you're saying, with evidence and with proof, and also knowing what's important to them. There's a phrase we always say, what's in it for me? Is the same thing with the senior leaders. What's in it for them? If you're trying to propose something, what's in it for them? And so understanding all those aspects was very helpful in how I approached them, and also how I respected the decisions they did have to make, which didn't always go in my favor, but they I could understand that they had a lot of factors that impacted their decisions.
I think it's coming through incredibly strongly that, yeah, that your kind of natural inclinations to understanding, problem solving, connection, empathy, and I think that just works brilliantly for you. But I think just to kind of build on that point of being very audience led, the what will they say no to and what will they say yes to, you don't need to know that ahead of time, but every time you find out a bit more information, that add that to your audience profile. Why did they say no? Did they say no because you didn't have enough evidence? Was it just, it was purely financial? How might you approach it? Get something similar to what you wanted with a smaller financial outlay, that kind of thing. So you're building that profile. Did the majority of people say yes, but one person said no? How do we get that person on board next time? Because maybe the majority meant they went with what you did, but we don't want to just leave that as that person is now like not on side. So what was missing for them? Like, that's really useful information, and I think that can build your confidence over time of where to pick your battles as well, like what is realistically likely. Also, I think no is not the end of the conversation necessarily in this type of discussion. It can be okay, clearly that it doesn't work the way that I've described it. So what could we change? How could this work? Could we influence to make this happen in the next budget rather than happening in what, right now?
Yeah.
So those are things that you can think about as well.
Yes, I'm definitely having conversations for the next budget already based on what happened.
Yeah, and I think you just came to that very organically and intuitively, and have like really built from there. But I think it's something that people can do very actively and deliberately, is when you're having those conversations, don't just hear the no and go, oh, I've missed out, they've decided against me. Go, okay, why did they say no? What could I do differently next time? What type of thing was it? And how might I do something that they care about more, or they're able to care about more, I guess, at this particular time with this particular budget.
Yeah, and just to add, and sometimes it is, but most times it's nothing personal. They're not saying no to you. And I think when you can remove your emotions from the facts is very helpful, because then it allows you to go back. But if you think it's personal, then you don't want to go back, because if they said no to me last time as opposed to what I was asking for. So that's been very helpful for me. It's nothing personal.
Thank you. That's really great. We have another question. You mentioned that being empathetic and flexible was key to leading through change successfully. How did you maintain your focus on your big goals whilst also flexing how you got there?
Ooh, that's a um, so when I came in, and Julia knows this, there was this work stream that was presented to me, and it was this long list of, oh, these are all the things we need to do. So I knew what the goal was, which was getting from the ways we were working, our ways of working was not working. And so we had to change things. At the time, the reason I'm giving context is so my answer makes a bit more sense. At the time, we had a Scrum team of about 30 people and one agile lead trying to shift resource around them. So it was a bit a bit of a chaotic situation. And so that's why it was our team well-being was struggling, morale was struggling, all of that. And my job was to come and change and improve the ways we worked. But the work stream was what I was given as the way to achieve this work stream that had been decided by people who had sat in different workshops and decided this is what we need to do. So that was what I was told to execute. But when I got in, I realized that work stream was not necessarily the way to achieve things. But the overall goal of improving the ways of working was still there. So what the final point was, we're going to improve how we deliver our projects, how we deliver our appeals, how we come together to execute projects. That was still the final goal. And so when I was looking at the different ways I'd been told I had to do it, that's where the flexibility came in. And I was allowed to play a little with that, where look at things in the work stream and go, this actually doesn't make sense. There were already solutions to a problem that hadn't even been solved yet. And people will go, oh, let's do time boxes. But is that really the best way? Just from their different opinions of what they thought could work. So I think in being empathetic and flexible, it was in hearing what people were saying and why they gave different solutions, why they thought this is the best way to go about it. And hearing that helps me to understand that the things they were saying as the suggestions or the solutions was not necessarily what they were trying to achieve, what they were trying to say. So to them is, oh, we don't like Scrum is working for us. Let's try time boxes. But the point was the goal wasn't about the method. It was the fact that how do we achieve project management better, for example. So in understanding and having these conversations, I was still able to like be empathetic and go, okay, I see why you said that, but is that really what you want? Or is that really what we need? And that was very helpful because the overall goal was still let's improve the ways we deliver work. It might not be the way you think we should do it, but I've heard you and I'll tell you why I think that's not the best solution, but I'll still give you what you want. So a lot of conversation, a lot of patience, but also still understanding that the final goal was to improve the way we delivered works and the way we work, the way our ways of working.
I think your experience, I'm really glad this question came up as well, because it's one of my favorite things to talk about. But it was kind of, like you said, with the work streams, the research method wasn't great. It for what you were trying to achieve. There was essentially 4 topics that were chosen by leadership. They asked for volunteers to kind of lead those topics. It was a very, very short window for like big topics like well-being and culture, something like that. So big topics, like a few weeks to come up with solutions, things to try. So that's fine, like, but as ideas, that's an idea generation kind of process, not a kind of right, let's just implement everything now kind of process. So it was very top level. It was these kind of very broad conversations, all done voluntarily on top of people's normal job roles, which I think is absolutely incredible. The amount of engagement and involvement that people had when they were already kind of struggling with the restructure and all this change happening. So I want to give a big shout out to the teams for being like really amazing and like never, like I said, never giving up, never disengaging. So really huge wealth of information, but just not formatted in the way that kind of it was presented almost to you at the beginning as like the list to follow, a tick list of things to do.
Yes.
So I think there's that, and then there's also what we kind of figured out together as well was the difference between reported information and sort of actual information. So people were saying, you had a great example of sort of a sort of failed test, and we talk about failure as being very positive. It's a way to learn, and it taught us a lot about kind of how to approach next steps. But you asked people to kind of identify something you would like to start with, a really like most important issue. They talked about having better terms of reference documents. You produced a better terms of reference document, and everyone looked at you and said, what is this for? Why would we use this? I don't know what this is for. And what that was because, exactly as you said, what they wanted was the process of defining and articulating and prioritizing pieces of work and projects to be better. And one solution that they had thought of was terms of reference documents, but that was almost all they could think of, because they didn't really know. But what they wanted was that process to work better, and they had jumped ahead to this like solutionizing, which was not the right thing. But it was great. It was that feedback loop. It showed a very fast response from you, listening to them, letting them feed in, letting them learn that actually what they told you was the right thing wasn't the right thing, and that they told you for the wrong reasons. That's all really powerful. And it allowed you to have then a really in-depth conversation about how projects are defined, articulated, and prioritized, which you've now shifted significantly, and you do use the terms of reference document as part of that. So yeah, I think we should always be listening to people, but don't 100% take it at face value. That's the end of it. Like, we want to interrogate a bit further. We want to understand where it's coming from, why they're saying that, so that we can really understand, are they just trying to make you do something, move progress forward, or is that genuinely like they've got the logic, they've thought it through, they've got the expertise to know that that's a great recommendation.
And it's funny because the one thing we did do wasn't even one of the things on the work stream. We just separated the backlogs as well, and the way we delivered and the teams. Like, that was the one thing we did that I think made the biggest impact and was never mentioned on the work stream. And that was from the research and talking to them and going, what's the actual problem?
Yeah. And that I'm confident, having worked with the teams and the work streams, they just didn't think that that was ever going to be accepted as an answer. The real answer that everyone knew, they were like, well, we can't say that because it will just get ignored, or we'll be told, like, you're not, how dare you? Don't say that. They felt very worried about it, but actually it was like, okay, let's try it then. And that was a huge shift, I think, as well for you with them, that they saw how responsive you were to that. And having that kind of advocate for them felt really powerful as well.
Yeah.
Brilliant. We have another question, which is about your managing relationships with other people, particularly what role did your exec sponsor play? Did HR play a role? Like, how did you manage those relationships if they were involved?
I would say my executive sponsor was probably Beth, who's my line manager, and she was fantastic because before I even joined, she'd already booked in coaching sessions with me because she knew what situation I was coming into, and she knew I was going to need that support. Having that was very key, and I know not everyone has it, but I was very fortunate to have that, and also, us. She was always there advocating. So when I had to have some of those challenging conversations with senior leadership, she was already on board, and she was always advocating for me in some of those rooms and those spaces. With HR, I think HR, the part where HR probably was more involved was where I identified like well-being challenges that we had to deal with and like escalated that. But in terms of managing relationships generally, I worked a lot with other team leaders who were watching out for their teams, and I have to say, people generally are very sensitive to the well-being of their team. So for everything we're trying to implement, they were checking in on how their team was going to take it. And one of the things I think really helped was the ability to influence those senior leadership teams and senior leaders to make sure they were on our side, and then to make sure they also could then get their teams on board. And they knew their teams, they knew who would struggle with the change, they knew who would like it, they knew what we needed. And managing those relationships was high priority for me, because I knew that if I didn't have them on board, then it would be harder to implement some of the things we were talking about. So relationship management is stakeholders, managing stakeholders was so key, and being patient with them as well, and knowing, once again, they're different, their preferred style of communication or of doing things.
Yeah, I think often when we are talking to somebody and they're saying, this team, they're always stonewalling us, they just won't work with us, I think it's, without exception, it's that other team lead trying to protect their team's capacity, their team's workload. And so if we can kind of have that human connection with that person, we can help them to understand, how will we integrate this? What might change? How can we hold some of that capacity? And then they can present it to their team in a way that feels safer. We can mitigate some of that risk for them. Because yeah, how the leader feels about the work inherently is going to affect the way that the team receive that work, and it's probably the way it's presented to the team. So if they go, we've got this great opportunity, it's so exciting, I'm going to do XYZ, so different to, oh, we have to do this, I'm really sorry, I know we're already overstretched. Like obviously that's going to have a huge influence on how the team engage with it. So if we've got them saying, yes, I've made this safe, it feels comfortable, I'm okay with it, so you can be okay with it, that's going to make a big difference. And I think we always talk about, we don't want to overuse the hierarchy. We want to be human and empathetic about everyone at every level. We want to be having those conversations with the team members themselves. But there is something important about the hierarchy of kind of like, yeah, that almost like a sort of seal of approval, like, yes, it's safe, it's okay, I'm okay with it, is really useful. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. I will say as well, you're right, like very good position with Beth, who commissioned the work with us. So was already on board with the idea of kind of helping with this problem, like taking a coaching approach, like really bringing people along on the journey. And she was, yeah, also did coaching alongside you as well, and was really interested in what her role would be. So that does make a massive difference. It's not always the case, like you said, but you can still make a lot of this change without that. But obviously that unlocks so much more. And so that was really positive. Like Beth made a massive difference as well.
Thanks. And then we've had Julia's favourite thing to talk about, and now we've got my favourite question, which was, what were your success measures and what data did you use to measure progress?
So one thing we did that was actually very helpful was even when so one of the key things we had to do was separate backlogs because we're 30 people in the backlog, they make sense. One of the things we make sure we were getting was data from the teams to see how it impacts how things were moving. So we had we had our head of survey create some surveys to make sure we're getting that data that we're using to refine and look through. But also the fact that people weren't able to deliver projects as quickly as they were. So let's say project success or execution of projects would be 40% success rate. One of the things we wanted to see is how can we measure that to improve to like a 70% or 80% success rate with project delivery or appeals. And that ultimately then impacted GFC because people could then, in separating the backlogs and doing some of the things we did, people could deliver their projects quicker, they could do it more efficiently, they were more efficient, so they could do more, but even with less capacity because there was clarity on what they did. So I think one of the things we really did was also make sure that we had data to support that what we're doing was the right thing. And it was literally having those surveys around and also seeing how many more projects we delivered after the change and compared to before. But I'm sure Julia will probably have even more to say.
Yeah, I think you did this. Another thing you did really well, and now I'm regretting not specifically talking about this in more detail. But yeah, the key thing was that you set baselines. So you kind of worked with the teams to understand, why is this a problem? Like, what is getting in the way? What are the kind of big blockers? So they could describe and articulate what those were. And you could have a look at like how many projects are moving forward, how fast are they moving forward. Some of that was quite loose, like you didn't spend months doing like really detailed baselines, but you could say like things just feel like they're always getting stuck, things are really slow, we've got loads of things that are kind of in a bottleneck for the creative resource that we're sharing. And then you could say afterwards, those problems are lesser than they were before. I just also want to kind of add as well the importance of qualitative feedback, because we're talking about the stress. We're also talking about a lot of things that people who are experts and people who are doing the work, they do know. They maybe can't articulate it as a number, as a stat, but they can say like, this is inefficient and it's winding me up. It's really frustrating. It's really difficult. I don't know what's happening and when. I'm constantly having to kind of chase things. Those kinds of things are not always fully definable, especially not in a like reasonable amount of time and budget, but they're worth listening to. So when people come back to you after a month and say, just feels so much better, I feel lighter, I feel more clear, I feel more in control, that's really valid feedback as well. I think that shouldn't be underestimated.
Yeah, and I know I said that at the beginning as well, where someone said some of the things we're thinking about now, we couldn't even think about them last year because things had improved so much in the ways people were working and like well-being as well. So yeah, that would be feedback that you can articulate in a number.
I think somebody also said something along the lines of like, you've put the joy, you've allowed me to bring the joy back into my job.
I was trying to
Like,
stay
that's
humble.
huge.
Yeah.
Such significant feedback, and it's not gonna, you can't write a sort of scientific paper about it necessarily based on that alone, but that is really powerful, and that matters when that's somebody's sort of day to day. That's how they earn their money. Now it feels joyful, and before it felt really stressful and horrible.
Yeah.
And maybe just linked to that, we'll wrap up with another question, unless anybody has anything else, do post in the chat or pop your hand up. But just maybe on that question of feedback, which was touched on there, and then earlier both of you talked about the importance of quick responses, people having the opportunity to be able to give feedback or contribute kind of quickly and regularly, so that you're kind of getting that feedback loop. And I just wondered if you could say anything about how you did that, like how did people give you that kind of feedback in that way?
We literally created a survey. We did. We actually had we need a survey. That was one. And number two, we had retros to actually monthly retros to just review and see where we were and where there's progress. And one of the questions I would ask was, should we go back to the way things were? And there was like, no. Okay, so we're moving in the right direction. That was always like a clear, quick win. And we'll just have like a poll in the conversation. Are we moving in the right direction? Yes, no. Okay. But there were also still people having challenges, and we still had that opened up policy. And we're still, even up to now, we're still refining some little things that will come up. It never stops. There's always room for continuous improvement. But yeah, we did everything we could to just make sure we got that feedback as much as possible.
I just want to add as well, I think that the feedback was how you approached your decision making as well. So you didn't receive, like you described, that like list of ideas from the work streams and just go and kind of implement it. You took that to the teams and said, like, where should we start? Like, which of these feels the most important and why? So every step of the way was a kind of collective discussion. Obviously, you made decisions and made plans kind of in isolation from the teams. It wasn't 100% everybody had to be in the room for absolutely everything, but you were always going to them and saying, where should we start? What type of things should we be doing research into? I think the other thing that is really interesting as well was how you were able to demonstrate that you were listening to the feedback in advance of the feedback almost. So if you go to people and you say, I'm creating a plan, please give me feedback for me to create my plan, you're already showing I'm going to be responding to your feedback. I'm not just doing this list and asking you to like all vote and pick one and then I'll just decide what I want to do. I'm building a plan based on what we talk about today is a really good way of kind of demonstrating before you've even got anything that's your approach. That's how you're going to do it. And then in small ways. So thinking about splitting the backlogs, you didn't have to, that was quite a big involved process. You didn't have to say, right, I'll split them now, done. But you could say, right, I'm going to go and have the conversations that need to happen and I'll let you know how they go. So you don't have to, it's not always that you have to respond to the feedback kind of materially and completely, but you can say, great, I'm taking that away and here's the conversation I'm going to have and here's when I'll be back to you with more information. So it's just, you can respond without having to have the answers right away, I guess is really important. It's kind of showing, okay, this is a conversation that we're having and it's progressing. This is part of it, rather than it feeling like, often I think feedback is kind of, here's a thing I did, what do you think? And it's sort of, most people are like, it's okay, I don't know. Or they're like, well, it's too late for me to say I hate it, so I'm just going to kind of go along with it. So by demonstrating I haven't created anything, I'm going to create it based on what you tell me, is a really effective way of kind of modeling that.
I know I was just going to add something that happened. So someone had actually sent Beth an email with some feedback about some of what we're doing, and Beth had sent it to me. But the thing is, I don't think they thought I was going to say it. So when I saw it, I just said, "Oh, can we have a meeting and just tell me what's going on?" And she was so apologetic and said, "Oh, I didn't know Beth was going to send that to you." But I was happy Beth sent it to me. I said, "No, I'm really happy I got this. Thank you for sharing it. Like now I know what conversations we need to have." And even having those kind of conversations just demonstrated how open I was, which is maybe not something that we're used to before.
Yeah, that was a bit of a gift for modeling, because you were like, I love it, it's amazing. She was like, oh, okay. But I
Thank
think
you.
also, yeah, thank you so much. But I think also, like you said, retros, it's the idea of building it into the culture and making it the expectation is that we're going to be feeding back and talking about. I really like what you said as well, that kind of stark, like, is it better than before? Do you want to go back to what we were doing before? That's such a nice, like, yes, no. And then you can say, okay, how do we make it even better? And it just feels more kind of like we're all in it together. It's all of our kind of thing that we own. And it's up to us whether it's working or not. And that's, I think, really, again, modeling that without actually having received any feedback. I think people who feel insecure, people who feel a bit anxious about change and things like that, especially people who are under stress. But I think also we see this across the charity sector, people who are just too nice, don't like to make other people feel bad. So they see any remotely constructive feedback as being something that might upset somebody. So then we can't ever share that. We make retros, I think, take some of the onus off the individual to be like, I'm the big meanie who's going to come and tell people that they're all doing it wrong. We're saying, please tell me what isn't right, because we're going to fix it together, is a good way of kind of making that a lower effort, lower stress, lower intensity kind of ask as well.